The first man stumbled into the supply tent at dawn, his face pale as winter snow, and his eyes glazed with fever. And by noon 3 more had fallen with the same shaking chills that promised death was riding into camp on horseback. Cassandra Wright pressed her palm against the canvas wall of her father's surveying tent and listened to the chaos erupting outside in the railroad work camp. It was early June in 1885, and the Northern Pacific Railroad extension through the Montana Territory had brought together nearly 200 men in this temporary settlement along the Yellowstone River. Her father, Edmund Wright, chief surveyor for this section of track, had insisted she accompany him for the summer months, believing the fresh air and adventure would cure her melancholy after her mother's passing the previous winter. Now Cassandra wondered if she had escaped one death only to meet another. "Miss Wright, you need to stay inside," came the gruff voice of Samuel Porter, the camp foreman, from just outside her tent. "We got sickness spreading, and your father would have my hide if anything happened to you." Cassandra pushed through the tent flap before he could protest further. At 22 years old, she had spent the last year nursing her dying mother through consumption, and she refused to cower while men suffered. The morning sun blazed across the Montana plains, turning the canvas tents into glowing beacons of white and tan. Men clustered in small groups, their voices low and worried. Near the cook tent, she could see 3 figures lying on makeshift cots, their bodies racked with shivers despite the warmth of the June morning. "What is it?" she asked Samuel, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. Samuel was a thick-built man of 50 with a gray beard and weathered hands. He removed his hat and twisted it between his fingers. "Doc Henderson thinks it might be typhoid fever, miss. Says it comes from bad water or tainted food. We got 200 men here, all drinking from the same river, all eating from the same kitchen." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Cassandra had read about typhoid in her father's medical journals. It killed slowly, burning through a person with fever and dehydration until there was nothing left but a husk, and it spread through communities like prairie fire through dry grass. "Where is my father?" she asked. Samuel's expression darkened. "He is meeting with the railroad supervisors in Billings, miss. Will not be back until tomorrow evening at the earliest. Left me in charge of keeping you safe." A shout rose from near the river, and Cassandra turned to see more men carrying another collapsed worker between them. 4 sick now. Maybe 5. She felt her stomach twist with dread. "Miss Wright, please go back inside," Samuel urged. "We are setting up a quarantine area away from the main camp. Doc Henderson says anyone who is not sick needs to stay clear of those who are." But Cassandra had learned during her mother's illness that death respected no boundaries, and fear only made it stronger. "I can help," she said. "I know how to tend the sick. I can bring water, help with the cooling cloths." "Your father would never forgive me," Samuel said, shaking his head firmly. Before Cassandra could argue further, a horse thundered into camp, its rider pulling up in a spray of dust near the main supply tent. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with practiced ease. Cassandra found herself staring at him despite the chaos. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who spent his life in the saddle. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his worn Stetson, and his face, bronzed by the sun, held strong features that might have been carved from the Montana cliffs themselves. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a startling pale blue that seemed to assess everything in a single glance. "Samuel," the man called out, his voice carrying easily across the camp. "Heard you got trouble. Came as soon as word reached the ranch." "Colt, thank God," Samuel said, relief flooding his features. "We got typhoid fever breaking out. 4 men down already, maybe more coming." The man called Colt turned his gaze toward the sick men, then swept the camp with those sharp blue eyes. When his gaze landed on Cassandra, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. "How long since the first case?" he asked Samuel, though his eyes remained on her for a heartbeat longer. "First man showed symptoms before dawn," Samuel replied. Doc Henderson confirmed it was typhoid about an hour ago. Colt's jaw tightened. Then you have maybe a day, 2 at most, before this whole camp is infected. Typhoid does not wait for permission. You need to evacuate anyone who is not already showing symptoms. We cannot just abandon the railroad work, Samuel protested. The company expects this section completed by August. The company can go to hell, Colt said flatly. You keep these men here, and half of them will be dead by the end of the month. The other half will be too sick to swing a hammer. Cassandra stepped forward before she could think better of it. You seem very certain of this, she said, her voice challenging despite her racing heart. Colt turned his full attention to her, and she felt the weight of that blue gaze like a physical thing. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, the faint scar along his jawline, the way his hands rested easily on his belt as though ready for anything. I have seen typhoid tear through a cattle drive, he said quietly. Lost 12 men in 2 weeks, and that was with us scattered across open range. You have got 200 men packed into this camp like sardines in a tin. This will be a massacre if you do not act now. And who exactly are you? Cassandra asked, lifting her chin. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Colt Brennan, miss. I run cattle on the Triple B ranch about 15 miles west of here. Samuel here is my uncle. Miss Cassandra Wright, she replied. My father is the chief surveyor for this section. Edmund Wright's daughter, Colt said, nodding slowly. Heard he had family with him this summer. You should not be here, Miss Wright. Not with this sickness spreading. I am not leaving while people are suffering, Cassandra said firmly. Colt exchanged a glance with Samuel, and something unspoken passed between them. Then you are braver than most, Colt said, but bravery will not stop typhoid. Samuel, you need to start moving men out of this camp immediately. Get them spread out away from the water source that is making them sick. Where would we even take them? Samuel asked helplessly. My ranch, Colt said without hesitation. We have got grazing land and clean well water. It is not perfect, but it is better than staying here and waiting to die. Another shout rose from the quarantine area, this one tinged with panic. Cassandra turned to see Doc Henderson, a thin man with spectacles and perpetually worried expression, waving urgently. Samuel, we have got 3 more showing symptoms. This is spreading faster than I thought. Colt cursed under his breath. Samuel, make the call now. Every minute you wait, more men get exposed. Samuel looked torn, his weathered face creasing with worry. The railroad company will have my hide for stopping work. Better your job than your life, Colt said. Make the call. Cassandra watched Samuel struggle with the decision, saw the moment he surrendered to the inevitable. All right, he said heavily. Start getting the men ready to move. Anyone showing symptoms stays in quarantine here with Doc Henderson. Everyone else heads to your ranch. Colt nodded and turned to Cassandra. Miss Wright, you need to pack your things. You are coming with the healthy men to the ranch. I should stay and help Dr. Henderson, Cassandra protested. No. The word came out hard and flat, leaving no room for argument. You stay here and you will get sick. I did not ride 15 miles to watch Edmund Wright's daughter die of typhoid fever. Something in his tone made her pause. There was more than just practical concern there. She studied his face, saw genuine worry in those blue eyes. You seem very invested in my welfare for someone who just met me, she said quietly. Colt's expression softened slightly. Your father saved my uncle's life 5 years ago when a surveying accident nearly killed him. I owe Edmund Wright a debt I can never fully repay. Keeping his daughter safe is the least I can do. Before Cassandra could respond, the camp erupted into organized chaos. Samuel began shouting orders, sending men to pack up essential supplies and prepare wagons. The healthy workers moved quickly, their faces tight with fear. No one wanted to be the next victim of the invisible killer stalking through their camp. Cassandra returned to her tent and began gathering her belongings with trembling hands. She folded her few dresses carefully, packed her mother's silver brush and mirror, tucked her journal into the bottom of her travel bag. Through the canvas walls, she could hear men calling to each other, horses being hitched to wagons, the general organized chaos of a camp being abandoned in a hurry. When she emerged 15 minutes later, Colt was waiting outside her tent. He had a dark horse saddled beside him, a beautiful mare with intelligent eyes. "This is Shadow," he said, patting the horse's neck. "She is gentle but fast. You will ride with me?" "I can manage my own horse," Cassandra said, though in truth she was only a passable rider. "Not doubting your ability, Miss Wright," Colt said easily. "But we need to move fast, and Shadow knows the way home blindfolded. Your horse would slow us down." He made sense, though Cassandra hated admitting it. "Fine," she said, "but I want it noted that I'm capable of independent travel." That ghost of a smile returned to Colt's face. "Noted and recorded for posterity," he said. He took her bag and secured it to Shadow's saddle with practiced efficiency, then mounted in one smooth motion. He extended his hand down to her. "Come on, we need to leave before more men fall sick." Cassandra hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and warm, calloused from years of ranch work. He pulled her up behind him as though she weighed nothing, and she found herself pressed against his broad back, her arms instinctively wrapping around his waist to keep her balance. "Hold tight," Colt said, and then they were moving. Shadow leaped forward into a smooth gallop, leaving the camp behind in a cloud of dust. Cassandra tightened her grip on Colt's waist and tried not to think about how solid he felt, how warm, how her heart was racing from more than just the speed of their departure. Behind them, she could see wagons beginning to roll out, carrying the healthy workers away from the contaminated camp. The sick men remained behind with Doc Henderson, their fate uncertain. The Montana landscape spread out before them in endless waves of golden grass and distant blue mountains. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the dawn chill. Colt guided Shadow with such ease that it seemed like the horse was reading his mind, adjusting speed and direction with the slightest pressure from his knees. They rode for what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. The camp disappearing behind them until it was just a smudge on the horizon. Finally, Colt slowed Shadow to a walk as they crested a small rise. Below them, nestled in a green valley fed by a clear stream, sat a sprawling ranch house surrounded by barns and corrals. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and Cassandra could see several smaller buildings that might have been bunkhouses or storage sheds. It was beautiful, in a raw, untamed way that reminded her why her father had fallen in love with the Montana Territory. "Welcome to the Triple B," Colt said over his shoulder. "It is not fancy, but it is clean, and the water is good." "It is beautiful," Cassandra said honestly. She felt rather than saw Colt smile. "I think so too," he said quietly. "Built most of it with my own hands over the last 8 years." They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the main house, a woman emerged from the front door. She was perhaps 50 years old, with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a face that spoke of strength and kindness in equal measure. She wore a simple calico dress and an apron dusted with flour. "Colt Brennan, what have you brought home this time?" the woman called out, her voice carrying a note of amused exasperation. Colt dismounted and turned to help Cassandra down. His hands spanned her waist easily as he lifted her from the saddle and set her gently on the ground. For a moment they stood close enough that Cassandra could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes, could smell the leather and sage scent of him. Then he stepped back and gestured to the woman. "Martha, this is Miss Cassandra Wright, daughter of Edmund Wright. There is typhoid breaking out at the railroad camp. We are bringing the healthy workers here until it burns itself out. Miss Wright needed to get clear before she got sick." Martha's expression shifted immediately from amusement to concern. "Typhoid? Dear Lord, how many sick?" 7 when we left, probably more by now," Colt said grimly. "The wagons will be here within the hour with about 40 men. The rest are staying to finish essential work and maintain quarantine." Martha turned to Cassandra and took her hands in a warm, firm grip. You poor dear, come inside. You must be exhausted and frightened half to death. We will get you settled in a proper room. Cassandra felt unexpected tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness. Thank you, she managed. I am sorry to impose. Nonsense, Martha said firmly. This ranch has weathered plenty of storms. We will weather this one too. Now come along. The interior of the ranch house was spacious and surprisingly refined. Polished wood floors gleamed beneath woven rugs, and the furniture, while simple, was well crafted and comfortable. Martha led Cassandra up a narrow staircase to a small bedroom with a window overlooking the valley. It held a bed with a star-patterned quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, and a sturdy dresser. It is not much, but the linens are clean and the mattress is good, Martha said. You rest here while I prepare for the men arriving. We will need to set up sleeping areas in the bunkhouses and the barn. Please let me help, Cassandra said quickly. I cannot just sit idle while everyone else works. Martha studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Change into something practical. If you have it, then come down to the kitchen. We will need to prepare food for 40 extra mouths. Cassandra changed quickly into her simplest dress, a faded blue cotton that she wore for housework, and pinned her dark hair back in a practical bun. When she descended to the kitchen, she found Martha already pulling out sacks of flour and potatoes, her movements efficient and practiced. Can you make biscuits? Martha asked without preamble. Yes, Cassandra replied. My mother taught me. Good. We will need about 10 dozen to start. I will work on a stew. There is ham in the cold cellar and plenty of vegetables from the garden. They worked together in companionable silence, the kitchen filling with the warm sense of baking bread and simmering meat. Through the window, Cassandra could see Colt moving between the barn and bunkhouses, preparing spaces for the incoming workers. He moved with the same confident grace she had noticed earlier, every action purposeful and efficient. He's a good man, Martha said quietly, following Cassandra's gaze. Took over this ranch when his father died 8 years ago. Built it from a struggling cattle operation into one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Works harder than any 3 men combined. You have known him long? Cassandra asked, trying to sound casual. Since he was born, Martha replied with a soft smile. His mother was my dearest friend. When she passed 5 years ago from pneumonia, I promised her I would look after him. Though truth be told, he looks after me more than I look after him. He seems very capable, Cassandra said. Capable, Martha repeated, amusement coloring her voice. That is one word for it. He is also stubborn, protective to a fault, and entirely too willing to put himself in danger for others. When Samuel sent word about the typhoid, I knew Colt would ride straight into that camp without a second thought. Cassandra remembered the way he had ordered her away from the sick men, the firmness in his voice when he had insisted she come to the ranch. He seems to take responsibility seriously, she said. Too seriously sometimes, Martha said. After his father died, Colt took on the weight of the world. Thinks he needs to fix every problem, save every person. It is a heavy burden for one man to carry. Before Cassandra could respond, the sound of approaching wagons reached them through the open window. She moved to look out and saw a long line of wagons and horses making their way down into the valley, dust rising in their wake. The railroad workers had arrived. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Cassandra helped Martha serve food to the displaced workers, all of them tired and frightened but grateful for the refuge. Colt organized sleeping arrangements with calm authority, assigning men to the bunkhouses and barn, making sure everyone had blankets and access to clean water. Some of the workers offered to help with ranch chores in exchange for the hospitality, and Colt accepted gratefully, putting them to work mending fences and tending livestock. As evening approached and the last of the men were settled, Cassandra finally allowed herself to sit on the porch steps, exhaustion washing over her in waves. The Montana sky blazed with sunset colors, orange and pink and deep purple, the mountains standing dark against the light. She had not realized how afraid she had been until the fear began to ebb, leaving her trembling and hollow. You did well today? Colt's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the porch railing, his hat in his hands, his dark hair tousled from the long day. In the fading light, he looked younger somehow, less like the hardened rancher and more like someone who carried too much weight alone. "I did not do much," Cassandra said. "Just made biscuits and served stew." "You kept calm when most people would have fallen apart," Colt said. He moved to sit beside her on the steps, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cooling evening air. "That matters more than you know." "I learned during my mother's illness that panic serves no purpose," Cassandra said quietly. "Fear is natural, but it should not control you." Colt was silent for a moment, studying her profile in the dimming light. "How long ago did you lose her?" he asked gently. 6 months, Cassandra replied. "Consumption. We fought it for a year, but in the end she just faded away. My father thought bringing me here would help me heal. Now I'm not sure if I escaped one death only to face another." "You are safe here," Colt said with quiet certainty. "The water from our well is clean, and we are far enough from the contaminated camp that the fever should not spread here. You did the right thing leaving when you did." "What about the men who stayed behind?" Cassandra asked. "The sick ones. What will happen to them?" Colt's jaw tightened. "Doc Henderson is a good physician. He will do everything he can, but typhoid is vicious. Some of them will not make it." The stark honesty of his words should have been brutal, but somehow Cassandra appreciated it. She was tired of people softening reality, pretending death was not always waiting in the shadows. "At least they will not die alone," she said softly. "No," Colt agreed, "they will not." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, bright pinpricks in the darkening sky. Cassandra found herself acutely aware of Colt's presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the way his breathing matched the slow rhythm of the evening. She barely knew this man, yet she felt safer with him than she had in months. "Why did you really come to the camp today?" she asked suddenly. "You said you owed my father a debt, but you rode into a typhoid outbreak. You could have gotten sick yourself." Colt turned to look at her, and in the starlight his eyes were dark and unreadable. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because when Samuel sent word that Edmund Wright's daughter was in danger, I could not stay away." Something in his tone made Cassandra's breath catch. "You did not even know me," she said. "No," Colt agreed. "But your father spoke of you when he was here 5 years ago, after he saved Samuel's life. He talked about his wife and daughter, how proud he was of you, how you were studying literature and music in Boston. He loved you so much it practically radiated from him. The thought of telling him his daughter died because I did not act fast enough, that was not something I could live with." Cassandra felt tears sting her eyes, but these were different from the tears of grief she had cried so often. These were tears of gratitude, of unexpected connection, of something she could not quite name. "Thank you," she whispered, "for getting me out, for giving all these men a safe place." "You do not need to thank me," Colt said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was gentle, intimate, in a way that made Cassandra's heart race. "I am just glad you are safe." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them seemed ready to name. Then Martha's voice called from inside the house, breaking the spell. "Colt! Cassandra! Supper is ready!" Colt stood and offered his hand to help Cassandra up. She took it, and when she was standing, he did not immediately let go. They stood there on the porch, hands joined, the night settling around them like a blanket. "Come on," Colt said finally, his voice slightly rough. "Martha makes a mean pot roast, and you need to eat." The next several days fell into a strange rhythm. Word arrived from the railroad camp through a lone rider who kept himself distant, not wanting to risk spreading infection. The typhoid had indeed spread through the remaining workers, with nearly 30 men now sick. Doc Henderson was overwhelmed but managing. 3 men had died, including one of the assistant surveyors. Cassandra's father had returned to the camp and was helping coordinate care while maintaining his own safety as best he could. Cassandra read the letter her father had sent with the rider, her hands shaking slightly. "My dearest Cassandra," it began in her father's familiar script. "Thank God you are safe at the Triple B Ranch. Colt Brennan is a good man, and I trust you are being well cared for. The situation here is dire, but we are managing. Do not attempt to return until I send word. I could not bear to lose you too. All my love, Father." She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her dress pocket, blinking back tears. Colt found her standing alone near the horse corral, staring out at the mountains without really seeing them. "Bad news?" he asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. "3 men dead," Cassandra said. "My father is still at the camp, exposing himself to the fever every day. I should be there helping." "You should be exactly where you are," Colt said firmly. "Safe and healthy. Your father would never forgive himself if you got sick because you felt obligated to help." "And what if he gets sick?" Cassandra demanded, turning to face him. "What if he dies and I'm sitting here safe on your ranch doing nothing?" "You are not doing nothing," Colt said. "You have been helping Martha feed 40 extra men. You have been tending to the chickens in the garden. You have been keeping spirits up among the workers who are terrified they might have brought the fever with them. That matters, Cassandra." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips made something warm unfurl in her chest. "I just feel so helpless," she admitted. "I know," Colt said. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles over her knuckles. "But helpless is better than dead. And your father needs you alive and healthy so that when this is over, you can be there for him." Cassandra looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his tanned, work-roughened skin and her paler, softer fingers. It should have felt strange, this growing intimacy with a man she had known less than a week. Instead, it felt natural, inevitable, like something that had been waiting to happen all along. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" she asked softly. "I do not," Colt admitted, with a wry smile. "But I have learned that honesty usually serves better than pretty lies." Over the following days, Cassandra found herself drawn to Colt in ways she had never experienced before. She watched him work with the horses, his movements patient and gentle despite his size and strength. She listened to him settle disputes among the displaced workers with fair-minded authority. She sat with him on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from childhood memories to dreams for the future. Colt told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about his father's death from a heart attack that took him suddenly and without warning. He spoke of his mother's grief, how she had faded slowly until pneumonia took her 5 years later. He talked about building the ranch into something successful, about his hope to eventually start breeding championship horses alongside the cattle operation. Cassandra shared her own stories in turn. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her education at a women's college, about her love of books and music and poetry. She spoke of her mother's illness, the long nights of sitting vigil, the helpless feeling of watching someone you love slip away. She talked about coming west with her father, hoping to find meaning in the vast open spaces. "Do you miss Boston?" Colt asked one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. "Sometimes," Cassandra admitted. "I miss the libraries and the concert halls, but I do not miss the crowds or the noise. There is something about the Montana Territory that feels like breathing for the first time. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Colt said. "That is how I feel every time I crest that hill and see the ranch spread out below, like the world is opening up instead of closing in." Their eyes met, and Cassandra felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Colt was looking at her the way a man looks at a woman he is trying not to fall for, a mixture of longing and restraint that made her heart ache. "Colt?" she began, not sure what she wanted to say. He stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "I should check on the evening watch," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Make sure the men are settled." He left before she could respond, and Cassandra watched him go with a mixture of frustration and understanding. He was holding back, keeping distance between them, and she knew why. She was a guest on his ranch, a woman under his protection. Whatever was growing between them felt too big, too fast, and neither of them seemed sure how to handle it. 2 weeks after the typhoid outbreak began, another rider arrived from the railroad camp. This time, the news was better. The fever had burned through the remaining population and was beginning to ebb. No new cases had appeared in 3 days. Doc Henderson believed the worst was past. Edmund Wright was healthy and asking after his daughter. Cassandra read the letter 3 times, relief flooding through her so powerfully she had to sit down. Her father was safe. The outbreak was ending. Soon they could return to the camp and resume their lives. She should have been nothing but happy. Instead, she felt a curious emptiness at the thought of leaving the Triple B ranch, leaving Martha's warm kitchen and the beautiful valley, leaving the peaceful evenings on the porch, leaving Colt. That night, unable to sleep, Cassandra wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and slipped out onto the porch. The Montana night was cool and clear, the stars so bright they cast faint shadows. She stood at the railing, breathing in the sage-scented air, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. Could not sleep either? Colt's voice came from the darkness. She turned to find him sitting on the porch steps, almost invisible in the shadows. "Too much on my mind," she admitted, moving to sit beside him. "The letter from your father," Colt said. It was not a question. "I am so relieved he is safe," Cassandra said, "and grateful the outbreak is ending. But I feel strange about returning to the camp." "Strange how?" Colt asked quietly. Cassandra struggled to put words to the feeling. "Like I will be leaving something important behind," she finally said. Colt was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful, as though he was weighing each word. "You will be leaving to return to your real life. This ranch, these past 2 weeks, it has been a pause in your actual world. You have a future ahead of you, Cassandra. Your father's work. Eventually returning to Boston, perhaps, finding someone suitable to marry, building the life you were meant for." "And what if I do not want that life?" Cassandra asked, turning to face him. "What if what I found here feels more real than anything I left behind?" Colt looked at her, and in the starlight she could see the conflict written across his face. "Cassandra, you barely know me. You barely know this place. You have been here in crisis mode, everything heightened and intense. When things return to normal, you might feel differently." "Stop telling me what I feel," Cassandra said, frustration sharpening her voice. "I may have only known you 2 weeks, but I know myself. I know that I feel more alive sitting on this porch with you than I have felt in years. I know that the thought of leaving makes my chest ache. I know that when you look at me, I see the same feelings reflected in your eyes that I feel in my heart." Colt drew in a sharp breath. "Cassandra." "Tell me I am wrong," she challenged. "Tell me you feel nothing, and I will never mention it again." "You know I cannot tell you that," Colt said roughly. He stood and paced to the railing, his hands gripping the wood hard enough that his knuckles showed white even in the darkness. "From the moment I pulled you onto Shadow's back and felt you hold on to me, I have been trying not to feel what I feel. You are educated, cultured, meant for better things than a rancher with dirt under his fingernails. Your father trusted me to keep you safe, and falling in love with you feels like betraying that trust." "Falling in love," Cassandra repeated, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. She stood and moved to him, placing her hand over his on the railing. "Is that what this is?" Colt turned to her, and the raw emotion in his face took her breath away. "I did not want it to be," he said quietly, "but I do not seem to have a choice in the matter. You have turned my world upside down, Cassandra Wright." "Good," Cassandra said. She reached up and cupped his face with her free hand, feeling the roughness of day-old stubble beneath her palm. because you have done the same to me." Colt covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss to her palm. The gesture was so tender, so intimate that Cassandra felt tears spring to her eyes. "I have nothing to offer you," he said, "just this ranch and a life of hard work." "That is everything I want," Cassandra said. "I do not need concert halls or libraries. I need open sky and honest work and a man who looks at me like I matter. I need you, Colt Brennan." Something in him seemed to break then, all that careful restraint crumbling. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a fierce tenderness that made the world spin. Cassandra melted into him, her arms winding around his neck, her whole body singing with the rightness of it. This was what she had been missing, what she had been searching for without knowing it. This connection, this passion, this sense of coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Colt rested his forehead against hers. "I am still not good enough for you," he murmured. "Let me be the judge of that," Cassandra said. "Besides, I think I'm exactly good enough for you, which is all that matters." Colt laughed, the sound surprised and delighted. "How did I get so lucky?" he asked. "Typhoid fever," Cassandra said with a slightly giddy laugh of her own. "Thank God for typhoid fever." "That might be the strangest thing anyone has ever said," Colt said, but he was smiling as he kissed her again. They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms until the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Finally, reluctantly, they separated, knowing Martha would be up soon, and they needed to maintain at least some propriety. "What do we do now?" Cassandra asked, "when my father returns for me?" "We tell him the truth," Colt said firmly, "that I have fallen hopelessly in love with his daughter and would like his blessing to court her properly. If he says no, then we figure out another way. But I am not letting you go without a fight, Cassandra." "Good," Cassandra said. She kissed him once more, soft and sweet, "because I am not going anywhere without you." 3 days later, Edmund Wright rode into the Triple B ranch looking exhausted but healthy. Cassandra ran to meet him, throwing her arms around him with relief and joy. He held her tight, and she could feel him shaking slightly. "Thank God you are safe," he murmured into her hair. "Thank God." "I am fine, Father," Cassandra assured him. "Colt got me out before I could get exposed." Edmund pulled back and looked toward where Colt stood near the barn, giving them a moment of privacy. "I owe that man more than I can ever repay," he said quietly. "Actually, Father, I need to talk to you about Colt," Cassandra said, her heart racing. Edmund studied her face, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Oh," he said, "I see. Father, I know this is sudden, but—" "Come with me," Edmund interrupted gently. He took her arm and led her to where Colt waited. As they approached, Colt straightened, his expression nervous but determined. "Mr. Wright," Colt said formally, "it is good to see you safe. I wanted to thank you again for—" "My daughter tells me you need to speak with me," Edmund interrupted. "Or perhaps I should say, I can see you need to speak with me." Colt glanced at Cassandra, who gave him an encouraging nod. He took a deep breath. "Sir, I know this is unusual, and I know we have not known each other long, but I have fallen in love with your daughter. She says she feels the same. I would like your permission to court her properly with an eye toward marriage, if she will have me." Edmund was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Cassandra. "Is this what you want, daughter? Truly?" "More than anything," Cassandra said without hesitation. Edmund turned back to Colt. "My daughter is the most precious thing in my life. She is educated, intelligent, and deserves to be treated like the treasure she is. Can you promise me that?" "Every day for the rest of my life," Colt said steadily. "Sir, I cannot offer her wealth or social standing, but I can offer her a good home, honest work, and devotion that will never waver. She will be the center of my world, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of her." Edmund studied him for another long moment, then extended his hand. "Then you have my blessing, Colt Brennan. Take care of my girl." Colt shook his hand firmly, relief and joy flooding his face. "Thank you, sir. You will not regret this." "I better not," Edmund said, but there was warmth in his voice. He turned to Cassandra and pulled her into another embrace. "Are you sure about this, sweetheart? You are giving up a lot." "I am not giving up anything," Cassandra said. "I am gaining everything I did not know I needed." Edmund kissed her forehead. "Then I am happy for you. Your mother would have loved him, I think. He has kind eyes." The wedding took place 2 months later in late August, after the railroad work had resumed and the last traces of the typhoid outbreak had faded. They held the ceremony at the Triple B Ranch, with Martha fussing over every detail and half the county turning out to witness the union of Colt Brennan and Cassandra Wright. Cassandra wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself with Martha's help, wildflowers from the Montana hills woven into her dark hair. Colt wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly overwhelmed as he waited at the makeshift altar they had set up near the stream. When Edmund walked Cassandra down the grassy aisle between the rows of chairs, she had eyes only for Colt. He was watching her with such open adoration that her heart felt too big for her chest. This was right. This was home. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, presided over by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through. When Colt slipped the simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love her all the days of his life, Cassandra felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks. "I love you," she whispered as he kissed her, sealing their vows. "I love you too," Colt murmured against her lips. "My wife." The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Cassandra danced with her new husband under the Montana stars, feeling blessed beyond measure. The typhoid outbreak that had threatened to destroy so many lives had instead brought her to exactly where she was meant to be. As the years passed, Cassandra never regretted her choice. She and Colt built a life together on the Triple B Ranch that was rich in all the ways that mattered. They worked side by side, expanding the cattle operation and starting the horse breeding program Colt had dreamed of. Cassandra kept the books and correspondence while Colt managed the physical labor, and together they made the ranch thrive. Edmund Wright remained a frequent visitor, proud of his daughter and the life she had built. He eventually retired from railroad surveying and took a position teaching engineering at the new university in Bozeman, only a day's ride from the ranch. Martha continued to be a beloved presence in their lives, helping Cassandra navigate the challenges of ranch life and eventually serving as grandmother to the children who came along. Their first child, a son they named Edmund after Cassandra's father, arrived in the spring of 1887. He had Colt's blue eyes and Cassandra's dark hair, and from the moment he drew his first breath, he owned both their hearts completely. A daughter followed 2 years later, then another son, filling the ranch house with laughter and chaos. Cassandra never forgot the railroad camp or the typhoid outbreak that had changed her life. Every year on the anniversary of the day Colt rode into that doomed camp, she said a quiet prayer for the men who had died and thanked whatever force had brought her to Montana at exactly the right moment. Some nights, when the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, Cassandra and Colt would sit on the porch just as they had during those first charged days of their relationship. They would watch the stars wheel overhead and marvel at how quickly life could change, how tragedy could sometimes hide blessings in its wake. "Do you ever regret giving up Boston?" Colt asked her once, many years into their marriage. "Never," Cassandra replied without hesitation. She took his hand, rough and calloused from decades of ranch work, and pressed it to her heart. "This is where I belong. With you, with our children, with this land. I found everything I was looking for when you pulled me onto that horse and carried me to safety." "I was so scared," Colt admitted. "Scared you would get sick, scared I would not get you out in time. I did not know then that I was already falling in love with you. I just knew I could not let anything happen to Edmund Wright's daughter." "And now?" Cassandra asked, smiling. "Now I know that losing you would break me. Colt said simply. He pulled her close and kissed her temple. You are my whole world, Cassandra Brennan. Every day I wake up grateful that typhoid fever sent you into my life. Cassandra laughed softly. Still the strangest blessing anyone has ever received. But a blessing nonetheless, Colt said. They sat together in the Montana night. Two people who had found each other in the midst of crisis and built a love that would last all their days. The typhoid outbreak had threatened to steal lives and futures, but instead it had given Cassandra and Colt something precious beyond measure, each other. Years turned to decades, and the Triple B Ranch became known throughout the Montana Territory and eventually the state as one of the finest cattle and horse operations in the region. Edmund died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by his daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren. Martha followed a few years later, her passing gentle and expected after a long, full life. Cassandra and Colt grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered hard winters and dry summers, economic downturns, and personal losses. They celebrated births and marriages, watched their children build lives of their own, welcomed grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house Colt had built with his own hands now showed the patina of age, but it was still solid, still home. The valley where they had built their life together remained as beautiful as ever, the mountains standing eternal watch over the land. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the guests had departed, Cassandra and Colt found themselves once again on the porch where they had first confessed their love. They were both in their 70s now, their hair white, their bodies marked by time and hard work. But when Colt took Cassandra's hand, the touch still sent warmth through her heart. 50 years, Colt said wonderingly. Where did the time go? Into this, Cassandra said, gesturing at the ranch, the life they had built. Into our children and grandchildren, into every sunrise we watched together and every storm we weathered side by side. The time went into making a life worth living. I would do it all again, Colt said, every moment, every challenge, as long as it led me back to you. We were lucky, Cassandra said softly. That outbreak could have killed me. It killed so many others. But instead, it brought me to you. Luckiest day of my life was when Samuel sent word that Edmund Wright's daughter needed help, Colt agreed. I rode into that camp not knowing I was about to meet my whole future. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the familiar stars emerge overhead, the same sky they had watched together for 50 years, constant and eternal. Cassandra thought about the frightened girl she had been, fleeing a contaminated camp with her heart pounding and her future uncertain. She thought about the young man who had ridden into danger to save her, not knowing he would end up saving himself as well. Life was strange and unpredictable, full of tragedy and triumph in equal measure. The typhoid fever that spread through that railroad camp like wildfire had stolen lives and caused immeasurable suffering, but it had also brought two souls together who might never have met otherwise, creating a love story that would echo through generations. As night settled fully over the Montana landscape, Cassandra leaned her head on Colt's shoulder, feeling the steady strength of him even after all these years. She closed her eyes and smiled, grateful beyond words for the day a cowboy had pulled her onto his horse and carried her to safety, to home, to love. It had all started with a fever and a desperate escape, but it had become something beautiful and lasting, something worth every moment. And as Cassandra drifted into sleep there on the porch with her husband's arm around her, she knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing about the strange and wonderful path that had led her to this perfect, precious life.